All right, guys, if you have been running a small team, you had some tough months and maybe even some tough years. But we have good news because 2026 is the year where you can crush it in marketing with a tiny team. We're talking one people, two people, three people, five people. You can win against the big dogs this year for multiple reasons. And we're going to unpack all these reasons with Mark Donnigan, who does this for a living. He has created over 500 million in enterprise value. He is the host of a podcast that is 100% AI, and it works really well as the marketing execution podcast. I personally have been working with co-work today, and so myself felt like 20 marketing people in one room, and with 8 coffees into us. It was amazing. So welcome, Mark.
Well, thanks, Simon. It's really great to be here. We were joking about, strategy sprints, and I think we're going to sprint through this topic. There's a lot to unpack. It's so exciting. I am absolutely 150% invested in the whole concept that small teams, just in the age of AI, just simply outperform big teams. It's not even an issue of well, it'd be nice if I had the resources, but I don't. So I'm going to, sort of fill in the gaps, augment with AI or with agentic tools. Um, the world is just moving too fast, these days. So small teams win.
They
Totally there.
will, because they can decide quickly, right?
That's
They
right.
don't wait for committees to approve content. Like I had this
Oh, that
decision
is so
today.
true.
Do I really give co-work access
Yeah.
to all my files, to my email and to my calendar? How many committees of an enterprise would say yes to that decision?
I mean, it's crazy because for years, just trying to get some of these tools that were out there to take you to inbox zero, or and these are way before the LLMs and what we have today. But there were some powerful tools out there that could help you even with that. Organize, and I could never get an IT administrator to allow me to add it. There always was some security concern, and I'm not, maybe it's totally valid, but the point is that I was missing productivity in this area that we all probably even today, feel acutely with emails. So yeah, when you can run on your desktop and you have agency, meaning that the individual has control, it is the most massive unlock you can get, in my opinion.
Your podcast, the Marketing Execution Podcast, is 100% AI. Do people do
100%.
people like that?
Yeah. So hey, for listeners, I'm not plugging my own podcast here, but if you want to go, listen to what a AI agentic podcast can be, check it out. It's the Marketing Execution Podcast. And so let me answer your question, Simon. And then I think there's a real important learning for marketers. But let me answer your question first. So the amazing thing is that people respond to it as if it were me. So I get emails, I get, sometimes just comments in the space that I operate in. I stay pretty focused in this area of technology, and I've been there for many years. And so people kind of, they know me a little bit. I'm not saying I'm famous, but people know me. So people come up, oh, hey, Mark, I like your content, or I like this, I like that. And routinely I'm getting now, hey, I love your podcast. Um, What's super fascinating about this is it started about a year ago as a response to a challenge that I saw. And the challenge was this. The challenge was it's no secret now, it should be no secret in B2B, that podcasting is the most amazing content creation vehicle I think that's available. It cuts through, it's real, it's authentic. It's just a format that works. I can listen while I'm driving to go pick up my kids. I can listen while I'm on a road trip. My wife fortunately likes not only listening to podcasts, but she likes the podcasts I listen to. So I don't get too many objections there. Maybe it's more challenging if your significant other, your family's like, "Hey, let me listen to music, Dad," or Mom. But um, I saw this challenge where founders were either time constrained, they just simply didn't have the time, to do a podcast, wanted to do it, even had interesting things to say, were well spoken, could present, but they just didn't have the time. And then, there's the other, kind of on the other side where maybe, the founders are just, they're not, they don't express themselves as well through the medium of podcasting. And so I kept seeing this and I just sort of felt like, what if, what if what if I started investing in building this this AI workflow where at the beginning, there would be plenty of clues that it was AI, but I had this premise that I knew to be true is that the model is going to perform the worst it ever will today. So my thought was this. My idea was, you know what? I'm going to build a sandbox and I'm just going to experiment. First of all, I'm going to test. Will people even listen to it? If they do listen to it, are they just going to laugh and send me hate mail about, oh,
That didn't happen. They talked to you
yeah,
as if it was
exactly.
you.
None. So that was the first thing I wanted to
Hmm.
test was just what would audiences accept? And then the second is like, well, how do you build this and what are the tools? And there's a lot of voice models out there. There's a lot of approaches to building it. And so I went, well, I'm not a developer, even though my formal education is computer science, but I haven't pounded code since literally I was a teenager. So I went kind of right into sales and marketing after university and and stayed there. But I wanted to build it and then to be honest, there was a little bit of just a curious and kind of a cool itch I wanted to scratch, like this is kind of cool. Like if I could pull this off. Now, what stops me from just replicating this and maybe one day I've got a dozen podcasts and people are saying, Mark, how in the world do you do it? you know? So, so that was the premise. Now I'm happy to share my learnings and kind of where we're at today if you're interested.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in the first point, will people accept it? Um, I think now, where we are today, the beginning of 2026, I don't think anybody doubts that. First of all, you still can tell whether it's written. Sometimes video is a little bit more difficult to tell if it's AI, but there's still clues. People can still sort of tell when something was
I
AI
had an
generated.
experience. I was watching a rabbi. So I'm a Catholic, but I like
Yes.
spiritual content if it's good.
Yeah.
And so I was
Yeah.
watching on YouTube a rabbi. And after two videos, I realized that's AI.
It was an
And I write
avatar.
him in a content, dude, this
Yeah.
is great. It is
Yeah.
AI, but keep rolling, man. It's good.
Yeah.
It's working.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
subscribed. And he answers, and I think that was then actually him
Yeah.
answering,
Yeah.
or her. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were
Exactly. You don't know.
answering, "Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yes, I will keep rolling."
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And so even though, here would be the first important takeaway for marketers is if you still have fear, especially around audio creation, and video, but the podcast is purely audio. Although I'm ready to start building a video one, but I haven't
Yeah,
I just
that
haven't
was
done it yet.
video.
But
It works even on
yeah,
video.
yeah,
It's a bit
yeah.
weird.
So
He was just moving his hand and reading and moving just
yeah.
his hand. It still works.
It still works. Yeah, yeah. So people will accept it even when there's the clues or the signs or there's a little glitch or there's something. And that's why I actually do encourage listeners, just for your own learning, like listen to the show. And even though you'll pick things, of course, now it's AI, but you'll listen, you'll be like, okay, yeah, that voice inflection, that was a little weird, maybe somebody would talk that way, but there's little clues. But the point is, listeners are responding and reacting to the information. And so this was my first takeaway, was that we've now kind of crossed this valley of where people are like, oh, it's AI. Why would I even waste, 1 minute,
Yeah.
listening to that? No, it's about the value exchange. And if there's a value exchange, they will stay engaged. Okay, so
Yes.
that's the number one learning. The second is that um, building it, there is, I think one of the challenges with those of us, marketers who have tried using AI is, we choose a common LLM or maybe some commercial tool, or maybe we use, some tools that are built into our CRM, HubSpot, or otherwise, doesn't really matter. And the problem is that it's very, very, very difficult unless you are really hardcore into, experimenting and using all these tools to know what the right tool for the job is. And so invariably, when I talk to marketers and they say, oh, we tried creating, blog posts, and it was just easier and faster for us to do it ourselves. Half the time, when I kind of quiz them about what was your approach, what tools did you try, what was your process, I find, well, there was something significant that was the wrong tool. Oh, yeah, that model is not actually very good anymore. Used to be a year and a half ago. Now it's not. There's something along those lines that needs to be adjusted. And so, another major learning was that we spent, like I say, this thing was built. I hired a couple developers to help me build it. And when I say help me, just to be, really fair and honest, they built it. I specified the PRD and, worked very closely on the functionality. But we went through so many different voice models. We have spent, of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours invested in making this thing work, I would say 60%, 70% of it was what you might call optimization.
What's
You
the
know,
best voice model right now? I need to do an
well,
audiobook soon.
11 Labs.
Yeah.
For an audiobook, I would do 11 Labs.
Yeah.
The new V3 model is really amazing. You have to experiment. You have to experiment. There's only three settings. The V2 model, or actually, I think it's V2.5. The one that's, right before it has a lot more control. So you want to, and what I find is your voice type matters,
It
so
does.
like as strange as it sounds, your voice may actually respond better to like the slightly older model. My voice may work better with the new one. So
Mm.
you have to try
Hmm.
it, is the point. But 11 Labs, but the tool that we use to stitch together the conversation, because I didn't want this to be just me talking,
Hmm.
because I also felt that, um, AI is super, super powerful and the models are amazing, but it works best in that sort of short to medium length content. And
Yeah.
if it was me talking for 18 minutes, like people would just sort of tune out potentially. That was my belief. I don't know if that's totally true. So I said, no, I want this to be an interview show. And so that's the amazing thing, is this is an interview show. Now that's where this gets really tricky.
Hmm.
So it's
Like the
actually
Google LM
very
style where they talk back and
Google
forth.
LM,
Yeah.
Google LM,
Yeah.
except it's me with my co-host, who
Nice.
I've named Tim.
You and Tim.
So
Nice.
it's Mark and Tim, and by the way, I reference him as Tim, and he calls me Mark, and we go back and forth. Um, uh,
Cool.
it's an 11 Labs model that we're using for Tim's voice, and it is an 11 Labs avatar we're using, meaning my voice, with a 11 Labs has a couple different levels. I've used the top quality set and quality level. And then I use a solution called Wondercraft that stitches these together. Now that everybody's heard me talk, this is the first thing when you listen to it that you're going to go, wow, it's amazing. But Mark doesn't have an accent. So one of the glitches right now in this on the Wondercraft side is it introduces an accent. Now it's a if I lived in the I think deep South, um, uh, actually it
You
would
can make
really
it a
work.
game. Like we have to find
Yeah.
out which accent you have this week.
Exactly. And by the way, Simon, if you test this and you test Wondercraft, I would be super curious because when you go on the forums, and of course we're a real heavy user and we're on, all the forums and everyone complains about the accent, but I've never been able to identify like, is it sort of random? Is it based on, I haven't really heard, examples like, okay, here's what I normally sound like, and then here's what it makes me sound like. But setting that aside, so again, that's an example where marketers could be like, well, I can't use this. That doesn't sound like me.
Mark,
I,
I have a a, a question right now.
okay.
Could you, let's say you pick one topic, but you
Yeah.
change your co-host. Let's say you talk
Yeah.
about email marketing,
Yeah.
but this week your co-host is somebody from the past.
Yeah.
And then next
Yeah.
week, so let's say this week
Yeah.
it's Jimi Hendrix. You are talking about email marketing, but with Jimi Hendrix. And then next week you can pick David Ogilvy. And then next week Rick Rubin. Doesn't matter if they're
So, so,
alive.
so Simon, it's a brilliant hook. And I wish I thought about that
You can still
because
do it.
it is totally. And in that, and oh, your idea, you need to go do this, or I'll do it. Because then that's one way to get people to skip over this, I can't remember exactly what they call it. In the early days of LLMs, there was this, they called it the valley of something, where it was sort of like, okay, I really don't believe this because it
Yeah.
it sounds so artificial. And
Yeah.
then eventually the quality got to the point where you're like, okay, I do know it's AI, but wow, it is so believable that I'm willing to accept it.
And
And
today,
so the
and today we
yeah,
talk email
Rick
marketing with
Rubin,
Aristoteles.
Jimi
Welcome,
Hendrix. Well, everybody knows
Aristoteles.
that Jimi Hendrix is dead, so nobody would be like, well, that doesn't say, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like a cool hook, right?
And it's just
It's
value because
yeah,
you are probably want to find out what does he think
yeah.
about this, right?
Yeah. And there's so much oh wow, that's a brilliant idea because there's so much about these individuals that the LLMs know from all of the world's information, the entire internet, including their books, their
Yeah.
writings, interviews, etc., that it could even talk and respond, with the, like kind of like that person would, really. So it's not just using their voice. It's like, yeah, that's incredible. So, okay. So the second learning then, just to, summarize it, is that the choosing the right tool for the job is absolutely essential, and sometimes it's going to be the most time consuming.
Hmm.
So around the podcast workflow, excuse me, of course it's sorry. The podcast workflow, it's different than if you're just trying to figure out, what's the right LLM or the right commercial solution to write a blog post, for example. But you have to choose the right tool. And the third is kind of interesting that I actually have somebody who actually I call her my podcast producer. And what I learned is that even though this is entirely push button, the input is a PDF file, and then the output is a full finished episode. So the input is it could be a mini book I wrote, it could be a piece of content, it could be something that I found that was super interesting. It could be one of your blog posts. I could read something and go, wow, that's really brilliant. I want to do an episode on this. And we spent a lot of time on the prompts. A ton of learning around the prompts, how to get them to create kind of a whole like interview flow. But it requires a human to manage the workflow in the very, I'll say same, although the functions are different, because you're not booking guests and there's obviously some things that are more push button, but that human in the loop is essential. And so, for example, every episode that goes out, the scripts are reviewed, the scripts are edited, sometimes they're not edited really at all, or sometimes there's one or two words,
By
or
an
there's just,
agent.
yeah, exactly. But it's created by the whole agentic flow.
Yeah.
But there is a human who very much produces this show. And so again, I think, when you listen and you look past or listen past my accent, which again, now you're going to hear it and go, oh yeah, wow. Since I've talked to Mark, like, yeah, that's kind of a funny accent. But but now yeah, but you're going to listen, but listen past all that and listen to like the back and the forth, the conversational flow, the story arc. All of that is there, and it's 97%, 99% there just through the original agentic workflow, but it's the human in the loop that optimizes that extra 1 to 3% to really put the polish on it. So, so this is just one very practical example. We're talking about small teams. This is sort of small team related, but it's really more just about an interesting use of LLMs, of agents that can add real value. And then now, what's coming next? Well, a company that I run marketing for, NetInt, we are launching a podcast with our head of field application engineering. So the guy that is working with our biggest customers, streaming services, many of them that you probably have subscriptions to. And so Kenneth and I are going to be launching a show called the Video Infra Show. Infra's infrastructure. It's kind of a technical thing. Guess what? It's my avatar talking to his avatar.
Mm.
And this works perfect. Kenneth is so busy. He's literally flying around the world. I'm busy. And so I felt like, okay, let's now move this from my sandbox, which is the marketing execution podcast, because it's very safe, right? If I sound funny, if I go off script a little bit, if I say something, it's kind of like, okay, Mark, that wasn't really correct, whatever. It's marketers, it's my sandbox, but I now have the workflow baked and the quality at a point where setting aside the accent, because the accent is just sort of one of those things, like if you know me, you'd pick up on it, but it's not
Mhm.
like it sounds funny, it's just, you're like, well, Mark's not from the South, you know, but if people didn't really know me, they don't know that, right? So they think, oh, okay, it's a Southern boy doing a podcast. But I'm really excited for this launch, which is going to be coming up soon, because now I get to jump into sort of the real market, and now we're gonna see, how the real like a B2B audience Well, how do they respond? Marketers can be forgiving. Sometimes marketers like, oh, it's really cool. I know it's AI, but wow, it's cool, but the market's the market. So, and then with that, we're just going to be able to extend. And, I know a lot of people, and I have a feeling that, people are going to be calling and saying, Mark, how can I get a podcast? So
Yes, that could be a service on its own. You can start an agentic company that has these services for people.
I haven't, yeah, people have asked me, like, well, Mark, why don't you commercialize? Even the team that is working with me on building this, they've asked, and I've said, for now, this is for me. It's a little bit of a science project, but hey, who knows? Who knows?
So what's next for you? What are you excited about?
Well, I guess going back to the original, sort of premise of like small teams beat, big teams. We can certainly have a conversation about why that is, and then more specifically, maybe how. It's one thing to kind of make a sweeping statement. Then it's like, okay, maybe I believe you, but like how? How can a small team? And my observation is that we are in marketing, but really in technology. And I work with technology companies. I have my whole career, B2B. These are sales cycles that are sometimes very long, like even multiple years. The deal sizes are very big, as in, millions of dollars or high hundreds of thousands of dollars, which they have to be for long sales cycles like that. And, those require a very unique approach to how you market, how you educate the ecosystem, how you maintain relevance. You think about 2 years, a lot can happen inside a company in 2 years. And so, people, your stakeholders can come and go. Someone can leave the company, someone new can come. And every time that happens, there's a disruption. And so the pace of just change from a technology perspective, and then the dynamism of how organizations are being rebuilt and reshaped, and teams are shrinking in some cases, make it really hard for marketers and sellers, in this environment. And this is where, when you're small, you generally can have you're kind of closer to the customer, is what I have found. And I don't really know why it is, but I've just observed that larger marketing teams end up sort of like somehow being further away from the customer. When you're further away from the customer, you don't know what motivates them. You don't really know how they think. And a lot of times the knowledge that you do have is out of date, and it's no longer relevant. But yet marketing teams are making decisions based on that, knowledge. And so one of the things that, I have found to be really true, and that I focus on personally, is that I am, sometimes sort of joined at the hip, with the CRO, with the head of sales. I work very, very closely. I make it my job to be in, not in as in I'm sitting in every meeting, but to know all of the top deals. Who are the customers? Why are they buying our product? What is it that's causing, are they switching off something that's competitive? Did we win? What was the primary factor that caused us to win? Too many marketers don't know this, don't know those things. And so when you're small, you have the ability that, first of all, there's only, two, three, four, five people, right? So it's pretty easy in a smaller environment to even just pick up the phone and say, hey, Randall, I want to join you on this next call. Hey, when are you going to meet this customer? Guess what? I'm going to be in the same area. Can I join you? Hey, this trade show, I set up a meeting with this company, let's get together. And so You say, well, but how is that related to AI? Well, it's related to AI in this important area is that if I'm not spending all my time doing the mechanics of marketing, because I now have tools and I have agents and I have, Claude Cowork, right? And all of the other options that are out there. Now I can make it my business to get smarter about the business that your company is in.
And
And
that
I
matters.
think that
Yeah.
is, that sounds really simplistic. I know. And I know, that people listening, maybe even right now, they're, yeah, 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 of course. Yeah, that's right. But I just encourage you, examine, if you're a marketer, examine your workday and just think how much time is spent doing low value activities. And if you can take yourself out of those low value activities and now, for example, last night I wrote an article, and the article was based on a piece of news that NVIDIA made. And it was relevant, to something. There was sort of a corollary. And so I started doing just a little bit of, LLM work. And I realized, oh, wow, there actually is a parallel here that could generate this really cool piece of content that for a certain audience archetype, I'm intentionally avoiding persona because I think personas kind of get thrown around too much. We don't sell to mid-market VPs of marketing, with teams less than 50. Like we sell to humans, who have a problem, to solve. Anyway, I go off on a rabbit trail. But so after it probably was an hour and a half of time invested. So there was no push button. But the point is, after I went from reading a piece of news, reading something, actually, it came out a week and a half ago. So, but it had been kind of bouncing around, and I need to do some research. Reading that to an hour and a half, maybe it was a couple hours, but it was no more than 2 hours. And I've got this 2,500 word amazing piece of content, really, really high value for who would read it and what we're trying to get them to do, et cetera. And that's a much better use of my time than 2 hours, updating, whatever, updating HubSpot and going into LinkedIn and optimizing this it's a way better use of my time because I know the market. I was able to connect to NVIDIA. NVIDIA just bought this company and it's very relevant. There's some parallels there. So I'm able to
It's
connect to
higher
this major
leverage
news.
activities. You
Well,
can think
yeah,
about strategic
very highly
partnerships,
leveraged.
about licensing deals, licensing opportunities, about copyright, IP
Absolutely.
related things, much
Yeah.
higher leverage things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so then you think like, well, wait a second, if you have a small team because you're just resource constrained. And I've worked in startups pretty much my whole career. Not always startups like early stage. In fact, usually they were more growth stage but still startups. And by definition, even if the startup is 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and even if it's hundreds of people, or even 1,000 people, like you're still resource constrained. There's always more work to do than there are humans. So, so if you're resource constrained, you still can, um, you can say, well, I kind of have to do some of this 'cause I just don't have the resources. You know what? Don't go double the size of the team because I guarantee you double the size of the team, you're not going to double your output. In fact, I've seen plenty of cases where output's gone down.
Yeah, you have more meetings. You don't have time to
Yeah, I
work
mean, all
because
of a sudden,
you
more
have to coach
meetings.
them.
That's right. Now you've got to, you have a head of, who reports up to a VP, who reports up somebody else. And now there's all of the check-in meetings and there's the
Mm.
status meetings and now there's structure. And it's not to say those things are bad, you know, but it's just flatten the deck. You know, that's where I found, you know, the
And
most
that's the
effective
good
work
news
gets done.
for the listeners right now who go, "Oh yeah, I'm resource constrained. I have just 3 people on my team, 2 people, or
Right.
just 5 people,
That's
but
right.
we have never enough time to do the things."
Yeah.
We say, "Oh, that should be a strategic workshop. Let's do a workshop." But then it's 3 weeks later when we actually find times in our calendars. And
Yeah.
so those
Yeah.
teams, guys, this is your year. This is your year. When they start getting ready for using AI the proper way, you have experimented so much. A
Hmm.
few things they should avoid doing, like, I don't know, there is selecting the right tech, there is giving access to the right tech, there is thinking about minimum security measures.
Hmm. Yeah. So, my advice always on the get started side is, it is so seductive to see all of these videos and articles and posts on LinkedIn and X, and you know, I replace an entire marketing team, you know, respond marketing and I'll send you my workflow. You know, excuse me. And it's really seductive because the video, you know, the person goes through in 6 minutes, you know, of course, you know, all of the real heavy lifting has been edited out. They make it look like, oh, it was 6 minutes I set this up. No, no, no. It was someone like me or even someone way more advanced than me who has spent a lot of time, hundreds, maybe thousands of hours, and they built this thing. Don't get seduced by that and don't try and jump in the deep end. Start with Claude Cowork. You know, start
Wonderful.
actually even start before that. Start by just selecting two LLMs and learning. And I'm not even making recommendations. People say, "Oh, Mark, what do you like today?" And I'm like, "Well, what's the job?"
Mm.
You know, because I have pro level subscriptions to Claude, to ChatGPT, to Gemini. Now I use Gemini, uh, you know, apps, and so it's kind of all part of, you know, part of that, part of the package, so to speak. But to Gemini, to Grok, and yeah, let's see those. Yeah, those.
Whenever
Oh,
I
and
need the
Perplexity,
newest data, I go
and
to Grok.
Perplexity.
If I need it to write, I go to Claude.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
meanwhile, Cowork, that's a new area. I just started
Cowork has
today.
this.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so what I would actually suggest, the place to start would be just pick two of those. And probably everyone already has a chat GPT. So you got that one. So, you know, pick another one. And when you run your next, you know, your next prompt to create some content, or, you know, you're trying to do some analysis of market data, or summarizing something, enter the same prompt. I just copy and paste and I look at the output. And I make it a point to really try and understand, hey, when I'm trying to do this particular task, which one of these five tools, you know, is best for me. And so that would be the very first place to start. Because again, if you're using the wrong tool, or if you're using the tool that's not the best for that task, well, by definition, the result's not going to be as good. It may still be usable, but it won't be as good. That's the first place to start. Then then the way you expand is you go into the agentic workflows where now you have an agent that's working on your behalf. And this is where like Claude, you know, co-work can be super powerful.
I had a few moments today when I wasn't sure what to click because
Yeah.
it's asking me, well, first of all, connect it to your whole life, basically. Have it run your computer,
Oh
your
yeah.
calendar, your
There's
Gmail.
a lot of permissions that you have to give it,
I
and
said yes, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. And then it said,
Yeah.
but now, do you want me to run it or permission? Do I
Yeah.
ask for permission or
Yeah.
do I do it
Your
complete alone?
trust.
And I
Yeah.
was like 50-50. I just go, oh, permission, do it alone, permission, do it alone. But I was just winging it. Is there more of a rule on how to actually do it?
Well, okay. So now what you're talking about is how much leeway you give the agents to make changes, on your computer. And just for those listeners who might be, aren't familiar with cowork, and they're not sure exactly what you're referencing, Simon. Basically, what cowork does, there's a couple things that are really, really special about it. I think everybody has kind of heard at least a Claude code. Maybe you haven't used it, or maybe you've heard about it and you're like, oh, well, that's just for developers, right? Well, it actually has some amazingly powerful use for marketers, and there's just a whole ton of great videos on YouTube about this. So you can go kind of do your own research. Cowork is a more simplified, more sort of common language, just an easier interface for those of us who aren't developers. But what it does, it runs local on your machine. And what's super great about this, there's actually a big benefit, and I'll explain what Simon's talking about. The benefit is that now it can access your browser, it can access your calendar, it can access your email, it can access folders, it can open apps, so it can open, Word. It can do all these things. And so now it is like literally an assistant who has commandeered your computer and is executing a whole set of tasks while you're still using that same computer. you know um, Now the challenge is that you have to decide, okay, certain tasks, do I want to give it permission to overwrite files? Do I want to give it permission to change meeting events? Do I want to give it permission to write emails? Maybe you write emails but you don't send it. In other words, it goes into drafts, and then and
Yeah.
then you get to look at it and go, oh yeah, yeah, it looks good.
And
Okay, you
it's the
click
same
send.
feeling that we had when you hire your first assistant, and you were like,
And
yeah,
you
I
gave them
want you to
access
do
to your
my work,
inbox, right?
but now I have to
Yeah,
give you access to my LinkedIn profile, to my mailbox, to my passwords. Should I really do it?
yeah, yeah,
But if
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't do
That's
it, she
exactly.
can't work.
Yeah, yeah, they can't work. So the question of, should you give it access? You know what? Everybody's going to be different. If, there's probably certain, even industries, certainly certain jobs where the risk would just be way too high that something, confidential could be leaked, or, there could be a number of things that, you'd say, no, 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 of course, I would not want this to be able to send email.
Yeah, you say,
Um,
hey, please
but
cancel my meetings of tomorrow because I want to go mountain bike. And then they cancel all tomorrows.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So I think with any technologies, we need to be measured in how we use them. My advice would not be to just kind of go quote all in. You definitely need to sort of step into it. And that's also why, like going back to my advice of how to get started. I really, as simple as it sounds, really, like just like choose two, get two LLM subscriptions and just start by just trying to learn, like, for different tasks, which LLM or which model, executes the best. Yeah. Because again, if you know how to use your tools, we recently, last year bought a new house, and, the community is, this house is being built. And, it's amazing as you see the houses at different stages, and you see the craftsmen, doing the different jobs that it takes to build a house. And they all have different tools, and they're just, the concrete guys are working totally different than the framers, and the guys that are putting the siding on, they have different tools. They even work in a different way. Their ladders are different. And you see it, right? So, a concrete guy who brings his concrete tools to install a roof, is not going to work so well. Maybe he can get the job done. I don't know, but it's like not going to work so well. So,
Which one do you talk to? I only talk to Gemini and it talks back. All the others I still have to type.
Yeah, so this is funny. So many people talk and then just find it to be a more effective interface. For some reason, that doesn't work for me. I don't mean it doesn't work as in like it doesn't understand me. I just prefer to type. So I literally
You're
have
more
not
a
talked.
writer than a, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I literally have not talked. Now, I just hear time and time again, and people I know, or especially when you're using the apps on the phone, and talking is a brilliant interface, and so maybe the next time we get a chance to talk or do an interview, I'll tell you, hey, Simon, guess what? I'm now talking to Chat GPT.
Because I
Literally
go for
talking,
walks.
speaking.
I go for walks in the middle of the day with one big problem that I have to solve. And
Yeah,
I talk it through with
yeah,
Gemini
yeah,
and it
yeah, yeah,
talks back and it's amazing
yeah,
just to clarify my thinking, but it can also research some angle that I didn't think about. And I
yeah,
say, what am I missing here? Which which three other perspectives could I apply to this problem? What
yeah,
would so and so do? And I literally I summon dead people. Like what would the person who ran Apple before would do? And
yeah,
this kind of things, it
yeah,
is pretty amazing. And on my computer, I'm experimenting with Whisper, where
yeah,
I have to type something and then I talk, and then it
yeah,
types it, but it doesn't talk back. So it's really a
yeah.
different
It's
velocity.
like dictation,
Yeah,
it's more like
exactly. It's
dictation
interrupted.
function.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But don't you think that pretty soon we kind of are gonna be talking, and it happens?
Well, I think people have different learning styles, different communication styles. So, I do think some of this just comes to, those who are maybe more auditory. Probably my assumption would be, I haven't studied it, but, I know enough
And if you are
about
on the
learning.
road, in the car,
Yeah, if you're on
on
the
the
road,
street,
then obviously, yeah. And when I'm driving, no, I am not, typing into
don't type
ChatGPT.
and drive.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I'm not doing that. But so there's different modes of operation, like different environments. Like you say, if you're driving a car. Now, if I'm riding in the car, but even riding in the car, sometimes you're bouncing and it's a little bit difficult to type. So, but. I think you said something though that I want to pull out because I don't want the audience to miss this. You go on your walks and you're having a conversation with Gemini and you're asking Gemini, hey, what would, give me three more ideas. What would, the next CEO of Apple do? What would, and that is where the partnership really begins to unlock the power. The partnership with the LLM begins to unlock the power of what the LLMs can really do. I think there's like I think of it this way. There's like different literally levels of advancement of how we can utilize LLMs. And content creation, you know, write me a blog post about X, Y, and Z, and use this tone of voice and keep it under 1,000 words. Obviously the prompt should be more, a little bit more than that. But that's like at the level 10, But the level 100 is where we're using it as a thought, a reasoning, a logic partner, you
Yes.
know. And that is when, like I mentioned that last night, I had this experience where I wrote this article. And what's fascinating is that it wasn't a, hey, I'm going to give you an article, summarize it, and focus from this angle.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. That would have been like
Hmm.
level 10.
Yeah.
Instead, what I did is I gave it this news and a really detailed article about this acquisition that NVIDIA just recently made. And I gave it some context around, kind of what some of my theories were. And then I said, I want you to validate whether my theories
Yeah.
are correct,
Yeah.
and then write a
Yeah.
piece of content
Yeah.
about, in other words, write an analysis. And so guess what? It did. Now there was back and forth, and I actually used multiple LLMs to kind of get to the final written result. But it started out more as I have an assumption.
Yeah.
I believe this to be true. Can you tell me if it is?
And
Now you
that's the
think,
scientific method.
oh,
One of my
oh, it's
heroes is Charlie
powerful.
Munger. He's somewhere here.
Yeah,
I think this is Charlie.
yeah,
Charlie,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that
Um,
book, the Poor Charlie's Almanac,
yeah,
has dozens of mental models that he uses. And so
yeah,
pre AI, I would, when I have a big problem, go to that book, open it somewhere, try to apply a different model from a different industry. He goes to biology, he goes to other stuff,
yeah,
mathematics,
yeah,
and come back to
yeah,
finance, to his
yeah, yeah,
place, and
yeah,
applies that. So I'm
yeah,
doing that now with Gemini and with Claude, just at a much faster speed, and they have more models available. So I think from a sales perspective, but I say, but what if we look at that from that angle, or how would that person see this? And now from the buyer's perspective, let's run this whole thing, criticizes from the buyer's perspective. We
yeah,
talked about
yeah,
marketing teams sometimes being far away from the actual buyer. What if we it can help us really be empathic and really feel it from the buyer's side?
yeah, 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 yeah. Here's here's where, probably a good place to, wrap up even is that there might be some people who are listening right now and they're sort of like, this is all interesting, but like, give me the silver bullet, like tell me the tool and show me the magic button, that if I push that, I'm going to get, whatever, some result. And there is no magic button. There is no silver bullet. There is no like, this is the tool that, if you use this, you're going to win. You have to go do the work, and what Simon's talking about, and, what I shared in my experiences are you have to go do the work, because the things that I need, these powerful models to do are going to be slightly different by definition, even though you could say, yeah, but you're a marketer, so you're writing content, you're doing data analysis, you're, summarizing articles, you're, having it summarize PowerPoints, or presentations, and all marketers need to do that. But I'm working in a different industry. I have a different angle. There's things. And so you just have to get into the tools. And there's just no shortcut,
Yes.
to that.
And you can apply it either like a toy, like some people do, or you can apply it to the current problems that you have in front of you.
Yes.
And then it's a
Yeah,
different animal, and then it becomes your partner now,
that's
and it's
right.
real, right? Like today I had to design a prospecting challenge for a client team, and so I designed it, and then I felt it was boring because it feels like homework, and I said, this feels like homework. Can you think like Michael Csikszentmihalyi from the Flow book, other people
Yeah.
who found
Yeah.
more gamified, more flow
Yeah.
peak state kind of ways of asking
Yeah.
people to do prospecting rather than my homework style of assignments. And it went through,
Yeah.
oh yeah, let's see. And it brought many more ideas that I couldn't have.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. It's great.
Where can people find you, Mark?
Yeah, so my website is growthstage.marketing. It's a .marketing domain, so just go to growthstage.marketing. I've got a lot of mini books, a lot of blog posts, articles. I do a fair amount of writing. Also on LinkedIn, please connect with me, and I'm just Mark Donnigan. So just search Mark Donnigan, you will find me.
Mark Donnigan, everyone, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your journey with us. And please come back soon, Mark.
I will, Simon. Thank you for having me on.